Yes, there's a whole heap of different optimization actions you can complete, but there's really only 4 main areas, and it's 4 main categories.
Hello and welcome to the Paid Media Lab podcast. My name is James. I'm the content lead here at Lunio, and in this episode, I'm joined by Aaron Young, podcaster, YouTuber, and founder of Define Digital Academy. Aaron is the most popular Google Ads educator on YouTube with more than 115,000 subscribers and new videos being uploaded every week. He resonates with audiences on YouTube because not only does he have a 12-year proven track record managing Google Ads campaigns for global brands spending thousands per week, but he also has a natural ability to distill down and communicate core advertising principles in a way that's both informative and engaging. As someone who is in the content creation game myself, I look to Aaron as someone who sets an industry gold standard when it comes to the usefulness and practicality of the advice he shares. He also creates helpful Google Ads resources for marketers, and in this interview, we'll unpack how you can get the most from his Google Ads optimization checklist, which he recently updated for 2025. The link to download that checklist is in the episode description, and you can grab a copy of that now and follow along as we talk through it in this conversation. It covers search, shopping, display, PMax, YouTube, and Demand Gen campaigns. And Aaron talks us through how he's categorized all the optimizations according to his S.T.A.B or S.T.A.B method, where S stands for spending and segmenting, T is for targeting, A is for ads and landing pages, and B is for bidding. This episode is a little bit different from the others in this season, but if you get the checklist and apply Aaron's advice on how to get the most from it, there's a good chance you'll uncover some performance enhancing optimizations to make within your account. So let's dive in. Aaron, welcome to the Paid Media Lab. It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me on, James.
So I will have introduced you and Define Digital Academy in the intro to this episode, but in your own words, how would you summarize what you do and what your main areas of focus are in PPC?
Yeah, main areas of focus was actually, I started Define Digital Academy to really empower business owners to be able to run their own Google Ads campaigns. I was going to start my own agency, and then a little thing called COVID, which kind of changed some plans. But when I, had that extra time to go back and have a look, I saw that there was a real gap in the market. And what that gap was, big believer in agencies, love agencies, but for small business owners and medium business owners, even if even for some who are, spending up to $5,000-$10,000 a month, the agency model sometimes isn't a good model for success with Google Ads. You need to have 2 areas of knowledge. You need to understand how the business works and what are the drivers of success in the business. And then you also need to understand how the platform works, how Google Ads works. And unless you're paying super big management fees, a lot of agencies, once again, this isn't a hit against agencies. It's just they just don't have the time to really get to truly understand how the business works and operates. And so that's where Define Digital Academy started. It was meant to be a little side hustle, but within 9 months, it became a full-time thing.
Yeah, and really impressive growth, and congrats on reaching more than 100K subscribers on YouTube. It really is like a massive achievement and testament to the quality and the helpfulness of the videos you're putting out there. Before we get into the main topic for today, which I'll say more about in just a second, I wanted to get just briefly get your thoughts on some of the topics that you've been discussing on LinkedIn recently. So firstly, I saw in one of your posts, you highlighted a golden rule for people that they should follow if they're running both Demand Gen and Performance Max, which relates to the creative that you're using for both of those campaign types. So could you talk a little bit about what that rule is, and why it's important?
Yeah, so I guess it really comes down to is that you don't want to be using the same creatives as what you use inside your Demand Gen and inside your Performance Max campaign. And the reason for that really comes down to is I'm a big believer with every single campaign that you're running inside of Google Ads, they've got to have a specific purpose and a specific reason for why you're achieving them. So when you look at like a Performance Max campaign, it's very much going to be swayed towards being on the search network or being on the shopping network. So you're very much going to be more focusing, it can go to newer audiences, but more focusing people with really, really high buyer intent. When you look at a Demand Gen campaign, by design, the assets or the ads that people are going to be seeing are going to be on YouTube or display. So they're going to be either a colder audience that don't know you, or you specifically remarketing or retargeting to them. So your messaging, you're talking to someone different who's, on YouTube looking at other things versus someone who's completed an actual search. So one of the things to just look at with a Google Ads campaign, don't only think about the targeting, but also think about the audience and the user journey. And if you drill down to that even further, I just released a great interview. Sorry, not released. I recorded a great interview this morning, which is going to go live over the next couple of weeks with a guy called Corey. And we went really in depth into, even inside of a demand gen campaign, your ad creatives should be different for shorts, in stream, and in feed. Once again, thinking about people, where they come in, where they're seeing your content, what is their psyche on that. So like if you're seeing someone on shorts, shorts you're scrolling, whereas in stream they're completed a different search. So we're looking at in shorts, we're finding even inside a demand gen campaign, reviews, product reviews, testimonials, user generated content is way outperforming what I call addy ads. So like an ad which looks like an ad. Whereas in stream addy ads look better, and you can think about it because in stream they're expecting that ad to pop up, whereas in the shorts they're going through and just scrolling through, so you kind of want them to see similar and familiar content. So big thing about it is just thinking about how the user is interacting with that content, with the ad content, and make sure that you're matching that.
Addy ads, I like that. I'm going to refer to that in future. Yeah, for sure.
It's the only way I could explain it.
One of the other things that I saw you post about, I wasn't necessarily aware of this because I'm not hands-on in Google Ads myself, but you made a post and it relates to demand gen about why people should turn off optimized targeting for demand gen, that kind of optional feature that's in the campaign settings. So what is that feature and why should people perhaps switch it off?
Yeah, so optimized targeting is essentially, there's a thing inside of Google Ads which is called signals, which is very much for a Performance Max campaign. And essentially what happens there is that it takes the keywords, the audiences, all of those things that people are converting, and then looks and connects to people similar to that. Sounds great in theory, and in Performance Max, it is great. It is a great feature. But for demand gen, one of the things that I like about demand gen is that you've got a campaign which you can not only set to, so if you've got a client that's only got shorts, so they've only got vertical videos, you can run it so that your ads only appear on the Shorts network. It doesn't appear in stream, doesn't appear in display, and vice versa. The other side of what you can do about that is that you can also target it to specific audiences. So you can go, I want this one to go for I'm going to create a lookalike list from my current customers. And then I'm going to create another audience or another ad group inside of Demand Gen, which is, targeting the top 10 videos that I know my audience watches. So, but if you turn on optimized targeting, you're murking the waters between them. And then you don't really know which audience is performing better and which audience isn't performing as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. So then, you want to know, so then you can double down and minimize wasted spend. Yeah, really interesting and something I wasn't aware of. But anyway, to move on to the main topic of our conversation today, it's all about how people out there listening and watching can make the most of the ultimate Google Ads optimization checklist that you put together. And before we go any further, I just want to let people know that if you want access to Aaron's checklist, we've dropped a link in the episode description so you can download a copy of that as you listen along, which will be super helpful as a kind of counterpart to this episode. But essentially, the checklist covers all the fundamentals. It's not about hacks, about secret strategies, about the kind of advanced tactics. It's about the essential campaign optimizations that you should be making if you're serious about driving revenue through Google Ads. And it covers the core 6 campaign types. There's separate tabs in there, so you've got a tab for search, shopping, display, PMax, video, demand gen. It really covers kind of all bases, and you've even broken it down and listed how often people need to be making those different optimizations, whether that's weekly, monthly, or every 90 days. So clearly a huge amount of time and thought went into building the list in the first place. So Aaron, could you outline why you felt it was important to create and how marketers should think about using it from a kind of top level?
Yeah, so it actually started, I've been working on that list or variations of that list even way back. I think it was about 2017 I first started working on that list. And that's when I was I was freelancing, and I was freelancing to some different agencies. At one time, I was the head of digital or head of search across 3 different agencies. They had a whole heap of staff and a whole heap of campaigns running. So I needed to systemize essentially onboarding staff and then just quality control. So that way I could quickly look and go, this is what we've done in this campaign. Then also became really great for client reporting because, for example, they might go to the history of the account and go, well, hang on, you haven't changed, you haven't changed your bidding strategy in 6 months or 12 months. Why is that? But with that optimization checklist, we can go, no, we've checked it, on the 3rd of November, on the 2nd of January, and we've gone through and checked it and had those notes. So it became a really, really good, I guess, tool for that. And then when I started Define Digital Academy, I thought this is going to be a great teaching tool to, I guess, essentially systemize for someone new who is running Google Ads to systemize, what are the ticks and balances of what they need to do in order to optimize their account. But then even for more, moderate to midterm Google Ads specialists to even, once again, have a framework that I use, that I've been using for a number of years and it's been really, really popular.
Yeah, so to kind of drill down into that framework, the optimizations that you've included are categorized under what you've termed the S.T.A.B or S.T.A.B method.
Yep.
So could you explain what that acronym stands for and why it's particularly useful for performance-oriented campaign management?
Yeah, I apologize before I say this next line. I just want all the listeners to know that I'm a dad of 3 daughters, so I do tell daggy dad jokes. That's just part of the territory. But it was all comes from this thought that optimizations aren't just a stab in the dark. I know that might not translate a lot, but in Australia you have this thing of stabbing in the dark where you're just kind of guessing and knowing what to do. A lot of the way that I view Google Ads, the way that I teach Google Ads, is trying to really break down complex things into ways that people can kind of go through and look at it. And now when you look at optimizing a Google Ads account, there's a whole heap of different optimization actions you can complete, but there's really only 4 main areas, and it's 4 main categories. The first thing is the S.T.A.B stands for spending and segmentation. Your T stands for targeting. Your A stands for your ads and landing pages, and your B stands for your bidding. So they're really the 4, all of the different optimization actions that you can complete, it's in those 4 areas. So, and the reason why we start it from there is that you start going, okay, spending and segmentation. This is probably one of the easiest ways that you can optimize an account. If you're getting really, really happy with your conversion metrics and you're really, really happy with all the way the account's performing, if you just simply increase your budget, you're going to get more conversions into your business. Another slightly further step on that is that if you've got, in one campaign, you've got 2 services and you've got one service which is taking all the spend. You've got a second service which isn't getting much spend, but it's got good conversion metrics. You can break that out into a separate campaign so that you can get some more money spent on that area. That's where segmentation comes to. So the S.T.A.B, so the S in the optimization checklist is all about going through the process of looking at those easy wins. How's their spending going? Can we increase? Can we scale? Can we add in some extra, any extra segmentation? Then when we get to T, targeting, it's all about targeting. Now, for search campaigns, that's all about the targeting of your keywords, what keywords you're going after. For display and video campaigns, it's all about the placements where your ads are actually getting seen. And there's a lot more lists from there, but it's essentially all about targeting and looking at what keywords are triggering your search, or so what search terms are triggering your ads, what locations are they in, what devices are they on, and basically that what audiences are they going to, what ages, what demographics, what income levels, all of those things. Ads and landing copy, obviously what the user is seeing. If our click-through ratio is low, we know that we need to rewrite some different ads. If we've got really, really good targeting, really, really good ads, but we're still not getting conversions, we know then we need to look at our landing pages. And then B is obviously coming into your smart bidding strategy. So I know it sounds very, very complex, but what it's about is it's all about teaching a framework of looking to see where the problems are or where the opportunities are for your account, and then going through that step-by-step process.
Yeah, and the way you've kind of segmented and laid everything out in the kind of checklist is super helpful. And
Mm.
yeah, even segmenting it by those different areas is really useful. And as we already said, like the checklist, it covers the kind of core 6 campaign types that people are going to be
Yeah.
interested in if they are running Google Ads. Let's just say hypothetically that I'm an ecom brand and I'm running ads for them, and I'm running search, shopping, PMax, and maybe a bit of demand gen.
Mm.
How would you prioritize and approach using the list? Is it a case of kind of starting with search first and then moving on to shopping before getting on to PMax and demand gen?
Yeah.
Or is it just like wherever you happen to be spending most money is where you start?
Where you happen to be spending most money. I mean, I very
Yeah.
much look at this as well in terms of the triage. One of the first points about spending is really looking at. I mean, once again, it's all about simple principles. Like if you've got a campaign, so let's just say you're spending, 80% of your budget on shopping. That's where you should be spending 80% of your optimization time. So,
Mm.
I see sometimes some people are, stressing about a campaign or stressing about an ad group, and it's like 5% of your total account spend. So, even if that's performing at say like a 3 out of 10 and you get it up to a 10 out of 10, it's not going to have a bigger effect on the total performance of your account because it's only 5% of your total account spent. So I'm really, really a big believer in, focusing your inputs on where you're going to get the biggest wins.
Yeah, the 80/20 principle. Like we've covered it quite a few times on this show before.
Yeah.
Yeah, super important. The other aspect that we've spoken about is the frequency with which certain optimizations need to be made. And this is, I think, as you alluded to earlier, the kind of the benefits of having a clearly defined process in place
Yeah.
that you can refer back to, and it's there to guide you along the right lines. But what's the best way for a busy team or an agency to kind of operationalize that cadence and make sure that things are happening when they need to and they're being recorded as they should be?
Yeah. So I mean, by the time we're just in the process of actually going through and update it. Because everything's changing in Google Ads at the moment, we update this
Mm.
every 6 months that goes through. But yeah, that's once again it's just trying to get that balance right because it is really, really easy to actually over optimize a Google Ads account. And one of the core learnings that people really need to undertake is that a successful Google Ads account is actually a partnership, and it's a partnership between your optimizations and the automated learnings or AI or whatever you want to call it that's running inside of Google at the moment. So, so this is another principle we call the Google Ads optimization framework, which is essentially you set up your campaigns. You then have to wait, and people don't like waiting, but you then have to wait and actually collect some data. You then review that data, and that's what the checklist is for. Go through, review the data, make the optimizations, and then you wait again to wait for more data. Now, for some things like, some real low-level low-level optimizations, like your search terms, like reviewing your search terms, adding in negative keywords, you can do that weekly. For other things like you're changing your bidding strategy, you don't want to be tinkering around with your bidding strategy every week. The reason being is if you were to introduce a new target ROAS or a new, or even go from maximize clicks to maximize conversion value, your campaign's going to be under a learning curve for 14 days, 10 to 14 days anyway. So you need to not only let Google catch up with that, you then need to also see, a good 2 to 3 weeks of performance. So that's why we've added the time frame there, is because, time and time again, I'd see people, going through and changing their smart bidding, every second day and wondering why they're not getting good results in their account.
Yeah, yeah. Patience is key.
Mm.
And when you refer to over optimization, is that kind of what you're referring to primarily? Is like making frequent too frequent changes so that the algorithm doesn't have time
Yeah,
to go through that learning phase?
that's one
Or
of the main things, or people, changing an ad copy today and then changing it again next week and wondering why, not
mm,
really knowing. So it's more about just systemizing and going, you've got to actually do it in groups of data. So you've got to make the change, see what happens, and then make further changes.
yeah, yeah. So as you mentioned, like this current version of the checklist was released around 5 or 6 months ago. In that time, thousands of marketers have been using it. So from the feedback that you've had from people, Aaron, or from what you've seen and how people use the checklist, is there one part of the checklist that people tend to overlook but can have a really big impact when they drill down into that area? Or have you seen anything that comes up time and time again when people are using the checklist?
No, not really. I think it's all the. I mean, the other thing too is I've tried to create the checklist to be as small as possible, but it is still quite large. Um, I mean, there's definitely areas where people are in more. I'd say one of the areas where I think people have to pay a little bit more attention is definitely around the smart bidding, the bidding side of it,
Hmm.
and really dive into that and look at some of. I've tried to add in as I've updated the checklist every time. I've added in some more information in there, just because you've got to get those frameworks right for changing, introducing or changing smart bidding.
Yeah, for sure. And if someone is making regular changes based on this list, obviously you've got the change history log in Google Ads, and you can see what's changed in there. But are there any tools or workflows or processes that you've seen work well for staying on top of those changes that you've made and the subsequent changes in performance off the back of them, and kind of staying on top of what's
Yeah,
working and what's
definitely.
not?
So the way the checklist has actually been designed is that I actually recommend everyone to create a copy of it, and then you should have a checklist per client. So if you're working at an agency and you've got 5 clients, you should have 5 of those different checklists, one for each client. And then what you can also do from there is you can then duplicate it by the month. And then the benefit of that is that especially inside of an agency, you've got a complete backlog of if you've got, one of the problems that does happen inside of agencies sometimes is you might have, a PPCer who's been working with this collection of 10 clients for the last 12 months. And then for whatever reason, they either leave the company or they go into a different role and they're not managing this group of clients. You've got a ready-made book handbook of all of their notes for the last 12 months. So it makes it a lot easier for the transition. What it also then does do as well is that, if the manager is looking at and they can't see something in the change history, but they do see like a drop in results, say, for example, in March, they go, look, from March 2025, we can see a drop in results. They can go back to that checklist and look at all the notes and the optimizations that they made in March, and then, try to rectify those problems. So yeah, it also becomes not only a checklist, it also becomes a bit of a client notebook on the optimization process that you've done for that client.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's invaluable to have when you arrive at those kind of situations, if you have something to fall back on, and then,
Yeah.
you can investigate and figure out what went on here.
And I know a lot of agencies are using it in that manner, especially I've had some agency owners reach out to me and they said, like, it's actually saved them in a couple of client situations because the client was going, oh, what have you guys been doing? And then they were able to say, look, have a look at this checklist. We've got, 12 different tabs for all the different months that we've been optimizing your account. And these are all the notes we're going in and doing. So it's also helped save some clients for agencies, just because it becomes a really great communication tool.
Nice. Yeah, so that's a lesson for everyone. Where primarily, if you're using our checklist, that's great, but you need to have something that is going to save you in those situations. So it's good to
Yeah,
know that
definitely.
people are finding it super useful.
Yeah.
Just in the interest of time, I'm just gonna finish up with the last question. So, Aaron, you've been doing this for years now. It's something you know a lot about. But even looking beyond the checklist, are there any kind of words of wisdom or advice that you'd give to people when it comes to identifying and making strategic changes to their Google Ads campaigns? One of the things that I know that you've talked a lot about on LinkedIn is like there is no secret sauce, there is no advanced hack or whatever that's going to magically save your account. So
Yeah.
what kind of advice would you leave people with if they're interested in making performance improvements?
Yeah, so there'd be 2 things I'd look at. The first thing is that I would go, if you can just nail down and really get really, really key on your, especially if we're talking about search and shopping, people are coming in from a really high intent search. If they're clicking on your ad and going to your landing page and you're not getting conversions, 9 times out of the 10, the problem is not your ad copy and it's not even your keyword targeting. It's probably got something to do with your landing page. So that would be the first thing I say is just really, really remember what Google search. So when we say Google search, Google shopping, Google search campaigns is people completing high intent searches, seeing ads, and then going through the landing page. So there's sort of 3 chains there: targeting, ad copy, landing page. And if the first 2 links of the chain, the targeting and the key and the ad copy is working, the problem is actually the landing page. And a lot of people, especially if they've created the website as a small business owner, that can be a real touchy subject, an emotional subject to go with. And I get it, I understand it, but ultimately, you just got to go. You let the data decide. So the great thing I love about Google Ads is it's all based on the data. So that would be the first thing I'd say. Second thing I'd say, especially in this current setting. I mean, I think in the last 24 hours, Google has just released another update about AI Max, they're calling
Max.
it. I'm
Yeah,
trying to
big
keep
news,
it.
big news. We'll have to
Yeah,
record
and
some
then
kind of podcast about that in the near future. Yeah.
the biggest thing, the biggest take home message that I really want people to see at the moment is that all of the changes that are happening inside of the Google ads. So if we look even just in the last 2 weeks, we've had the relaunch of AI Max. You've had them come out and release a whole new reporting updates inside of Performance Max and
Mhm.
responsive search ads. Rewind, a couple of months ago, they removed video action campaigns, and that's now Demand Gen, et cetera, et cetera. The changes are going on. A lot of people actually missing the reason for why these changes are occurring. And the changes that are occurring is because the very nature of how people are searching is changing. So that's the main message that I really want to get people through, just to be aware of if you're running Google Ads at the moment, is that if it makes sense, if the way that people are searching, like people are now less and less starting to do individual keyword searches. This is going to be supercharged when Google releases Gemini 2.0 in a couple of months, where you're going to start getting, at the moment, they've already released it, AI generation for non-buyer intent keywords. So essentially, you're going to have a ChatGPT environment inside of Google search.
For all
So
keywords, like for not just the long tail, like
a lot of them,
informational ones.
a lot of them is going to be moving over to transactional as well. So you've got to really look at that's why all of these changes are happening. So, um, I'm not saying just burn up your total account and just change everything. What I'm just saying is be adaptive. Test these new things that come out, and some of them are good, some of them are bad, some of them just won't be for your business. But yeah, don't get caught in the fight of, you wish it was like, I wish Google Ads was like what it was 5 and 10 years ago, because Google search isn't the same as what it was 5 or 10 years ago. So you've got to adapt and roll with the changes.
Yeah, 100%. Like I remember when I was speaking with Miles McNair, it was more than 2 years ago now when PMax first rolled out, and yeah, he
Yeah.
was just making that same point of like, look, like you can complain all you want, but this is the new landscape. This is the direction that we're going in. So if
Yep.
you continue to insist that I want it to be like it was before, well, it's not going to be helpful for you or anyone
Yeah.
else. So
No,
yeah,
definitely. Look, I still say that I do look back and I go, I wish, give me a broad match modifier with single keyword, all of that stuff. It in some ways it was easier, but then at the same time, the other side of it, I go, it really, I think, has really refreshed my love for the platform, because you're having to go through a relearning cycle and a retesting cycle. And also as well, I think long term, if these changes aren't made now, Google Ads will become, today's yellow pages where no one uses it anymore. So it's just keeping in mind that, the reason why these adaptations are happening so quick is because the search and the nature of search is changing. So if Google Ads doesn't change, it'll be tomorrow's yellow pages.
super interesting. Well, I know Google's not going to let that happen. So yeah, they're
Yeah.
going to stay ahead of the curve on that one. But yeah, we'll have to leave it there for time. But thank you so much for joining me today, Aaron. It was great to connect. And if you've listened to this episode, you should be in the perfect position right now to go download Aaron's checklist and start making some meaningful changes to your account. But before we wrap up, Aaron, is there anything else you'd like to mention or let people know about?
No, that's it. Obviously you can see me enough in and around YouTube and different things. But yeah, download the checklist and enjoy it. And James, thank you so much for having me.
That's it for this episode of the Paid Media Lab. Thanks for tuning in. If you found it helpful, hit the subscribe button to get the next episode as soon as it's released. Subscribing costs nothing, and it helps us bring you the best possible guests in the next season. And if you want more advice on how to boost your return on ad spend, head to lunio.ai, where you'll find loads more free tools, resources, and guides. Lastly, if you know any other marketers who benefit from the tips in this episode, you can do them and us a favor by sending them the link to the show. That's all for this one, and I'll see you in the next episode.